I, 21F, used to date my ex, 30M, in school. He was my brother's, 30M, best friend. We dated for over 3 years. On my graduation day from high school, he proposed to me. I was not ready to get married, so I rejected his proposal. He was apparently heartbroken. Well, I'm not belittling his feelings, but the thing is I had told him about my dreams of pursuing a career before getting married. Even after knowing my goals in life, if he proposes to me, I could do nothing except turn it down. Instead of understanding me, he gaslighted the situation and said I was an a-hole for exploiting his feelings for 3 years and then rejecting his proposal. I loved him. I was not playing with his feelings, but I had my plans in life. I was barely 18 then. I don't know how he expected me to drop my career and settle down with him. I tried to reason out my concerns, but eventually, I realized it's better to move on from him. So, I broke up with him. He went around and told my family about it. My brother asked me the reason and I told him it was my career. He understood my point and told my ex to be supportive of me if he wanted me in his life. My sister, 26F, was upset with me. She was dating my ex's brother. They were planning their wedding in a year or two. She wanted me to continue with my ex and eventually marry him so that we could be connected together as one happy family. That idea used to excite me earlier, but seeing the true colors of my ex after the breakup, I was out of that plan. It was not an easy decision for me, knowing that I would bump upon him more often than not. My ex has always been close to my family since he was my brother's best friend. Ex's brother also had his thing with my sister, so the 3 boys, my brother, ex, and his brother, would always hang out at our place. Me and my sister used to tag along with them. My parents liked them. We had vacations together. You see how complex the situation is. I understand it was difficult for him too, because he may not be able to hang out at our house anymore, but that jerk was a leech. After a month of going around badmouthing me in front of my siblings, he returned and suggested we continue dating and push the marriage to the back seat. I said I didn't want to be with him and we should part ways. He told everyone that I was a bitch that played with his feelings. I mean, yes, while turning down his proposal for marriage, I told him that I loved him and we could continue to date, and when I'm settled in my career, we can revisit the idea of marriage. But this was before he went around bitching about me. But after seeing the man-child in him, I was done with him. His emotions of feeling betrayed were still understandable. Heartbreak could be tricky. The way my sister was behaving was kinda weird. She was mad at me for breaking up with my ex. She said, "How could you ruin our perfect plan of being together as a happy family? We both would marry in the same family and be the godmother of each other's children. We would go on family vacations. Do you imagine the fun it would be? The family dinners and Christmas would be so much fun." I said we could still do all these without my ex. No matter how I tried to reason out to her, she would never understand. Every other day, she would come around nagging with another good reason to take my ex back. Living in the same house, it was difficult to ignore her. When she could not convince me alone, she brought our mom into her team. I tell you, no one could nag you more than your mom. They tried all means to convince me, from listing down his good qualities to alluring me with his dad's wealth. I still said nope. When they couldn't move me through their manipulations, they started making plans that would force me to see my ex around. My sister planned dinners and outings that would be a nightmare for me. My ex started acting creepy, and surprisingly it was just me who thought this. Rest everyone thought he was madly in love with me and cute for making moves at me. Once they planned a vacation. I wanted to skip it, but my siblings assured me that they would make it comfortable for me. However, on reaching there, I found that they had booked only 3 rooms. My sister and her boyfriend took one, my brother and his girlfriend got another, and I was left to share a room with my ex. I couldn't believe they would go so far as to make me share a room with him. That was it. I stormed out of the hotel and came back home. Since then I never went for any vacations or dinners with them. I laid out a clear choice in front of my siblings. It's either him or me. My brother backed off after that, but my sister threw tantrums at me. Called me rude and egoistic. My ex continued to hang out with my siblings. Such a loser. They often went outside, but no one asked me to be a part of their plan. It was such a relief to be able to get my ex off my back. I stopped going out with them. Initially, I used to be bored and felt alone because I had no close friends to hang out with. I had been hanging out with them for the last many years. So, I decided to move to a different city. I applied for an undergrad program and moved out. It was a tough decision, but I was determined to cut off my ex from my life. I wasn't this bitter about my ex during the breakup. It was the aftermath that made me resentful of him. Finally, I was able to cut the crap out of my life. It's been 2 years since then and I have not gone home. It is fun here. I met a guy last year. He was in his senior year and now he is working at a private bank. He's from a different uni. We met at a college festival and since then we could not stop seeing each other. We have a lot in common. Few months back, I moved in with him and posted a picture with him on my Instagram. My sister asked me who he was. I said my boyfriend, and we've been living together. She didn't say anything after that. I told my boyfriend about my ex. He was stunned to know how my sister relentlessly tried to me up with my ex despite my refusal. Last week, my sister called me and said she was getting married and she wants me to be her maid of honor. Not only that, she wants me to help her with the wedding preparations. I was excited. Except for that brief period of bitterness due to my ex, my sister and I shared a good bond. We have so many happy memories with each other. We had made many plans for each other's wedding. You know how sisters are. Perhaps, my concern might be evident now. My sister is getting married to my ex's brother, so the presence of my ex is imminent at the wedding unless there had been any fallout between the brothers. I don't want to bump into my loser ex again. Neither do I want to miss my sister's wedding. Update 1. Hello all, thanks for all the advice. As suggested by you guys, I made it clear to my sister that she should not try to patch me up with my ex anymore, and if I get the slightest hint about it, I'm gonna storm out from the wedding. She assured me that nothing of that sort would happen because my ex was also dating someone and they are pretty serious about it. It was such a relief. Almost 10 days before the wedding, I headed home to spend time with my family. My sister was also home during that period. It was so fun catching up with them after 2 years. My brother was missing from the picture because he had moved to Canada. He arrived on the wedding day. I was happy to see they had moved on from obsessing about my ex. However, that was short-lived. They had different plans for setting me up with my ex. Coming to that eventually. It was all so much fun helping my family with the wedding preparation until the day before the wedding. So, they had booked a lakeside mansion sort of a thing for the wedding. It was like 100 miles away from our place. The night before the wedding, there was the bachelor/bachelorette party at the mansion. Me and my sister and a few of her friends headed to the venue a day before the wedding. I reluctantly asked her who all were coming from her fiancé's side. She said his bunch of friends from high school. I had this eerie feeling of my ex showing up and making it uncomfortable for me, but my sister assured me that he had moved on. I thought, and even she said that the bachelor's and bachelorette's party would be separate, but after reaching there, she just said, "Oh, the event manager clubbed it both." I was stupid to think that she hid this because my mom would be mad at her for meeting her husband a day before the wedding. We have a custom to not to meet the groom/bride at least a week prior to the wedding. I asked her if mom knew about this joint party. She said no, don't tell her. She would get mad at me. We all got dressed up and reached the spot. It was a pool party at the rooftop. My sister's fiancé arrived with his friends. The party started and we all were enjoying it until I saw my ex creepily staring at me from a distance. I rushed and pulled my sister by her arms. I asked her what my ex was doing there. She said, "Well, he's my fiancé's brother. It should be a surprise if he wasn't here." I was surprised at her changing colors. Had I known he would be here, I would have skipped this party. She winked at me and said, "You're still obsessed with him, aren't you?" I said I'm not, but looks like you guys are still hooked up with the idea of patching me up with him. She grinned and asked me to take it lightly. She was like, "You both are dating different people in life, so what's the big deal in spending one evening together? You don't need to talk to him. Ignore him as if he doesn't exist, or you might just call it a cheat day." I rolled my eyes and went away. It was moreover a pool party and not a bachelor or bachelorette party. My sister was glued to her fiancé and most of her friends were hitting on the groom's friend. My ex was also flirting with one of my sister's friends. It was getting boring for me. I was killing my time, chatting with my boyfriend and updating him about what was happening there. He was invited to the wedding, which was on the next day. Had I known it was a combined party and I would be left on my own, I would have called my boyfriend. It was still 10 when I called it a day, grabbed one of the rooms of the mansion, and snoozed. Around 11:30 my sister knocked, asking me to give her the room because the rest of the 5 rooms were occupied by their friends and groomsmen. I told her to sleep with me and that her fiancé could adjust with any of the groomsmen. She insisted that they want to spend the night together, so I should adjust with any of her friends. They were really drunk and started making out in front of me. So, I grabbed my stuff and moved out. I knocked in a couple of rooms, but it looked like they all had company. I came back to my room and asked my sister to finish her business faster and let her fiancé go and sleep in another room. Her fiancé told me that there's a small studio room upstairs that I can grab. I went there and found it was occupied by my ex. He was alone. He was saying something, but I stormed back to my room and yelled at my sister. At this point, I doubted if she was actually drunk or if she was pretending to pull out her plan. She said, "It's just a matter of one night. You can adjust with him." I was dumbfounded at her suggestion and she slammed the door in my face. I wanted to storm off the venue and drive back, but it was too late in the night to drive off from such a remote location. After my failed search for a vacant room, I dozed off on the couch near the entrance. I was shivering with cold when one of the housekeeping women offered me a blanket. I was so pissed off at my sister that I wanted to walk out of her wedding the next day. In the early morning, my sister woke me up and said, "What are you doing here in the cold? Why didn't you sleep in the room upstairs?" I wanted to strangle her to death. I gave her a cold look. She said, "I didn't ask you to have sex with him. People can sleep in the same bed without having sex." I got so mad at this that I yelled, "Probably, You should try this with your husband after your divorce, and then let me know how it feels. She got offended that I was wishing for her divorce on her wedding day. She tried to gaslight the situation that it was my fault that I was overreacting my ex's presence at the party. I didn't give in to her pressure and pushed her to the corner until she confessed about deliberately putting me in a spot where I would be forced to share a room with my ex. She yelled, "Yes, I did that and it was for your own good. He still loves you despite all your narcissism. You won't get a better man than him. No one can keep you happy more than him. See, he is still ready to accept you after everything you did to him." To my surprise, I saw him standing at the corner of the hallway and sobbing. What a pathetic loser he is. She was saying something about my boyfriend. I didn't hear it clearly. I was grabbing my stuff to storm off the venue. I said I'd not attend her wedding and she said fine by me. You anyways find solace in outsiders. She didn't even try to stop me. I drove off from the place. My parents called me asking, "What happened between you two that your sister is asking us not to let you attend her wedding?" I said, "Great if she said so because I'm not keen on attending it either." They tried to probe me further but I hung up the call saying they should ask her about it. My brother also called me after reaching the venue. He said he was looking forward to catching up with me. I narrated to him the entire incident. He said it was my decision and he respects it. Probably my brother told my parents about the incident. They called me again and said they were sorry for what happened the other night but they still wanted me to attend my sister's wedding. They said they didn't want people to gossip and question my absence at the wedding. I laid out a choice that I would attend the wedding only if they asked that jerk to leave. They said they can't do that because he was the groom's brother. My anger had overshadowed my brain. I don't know if that was good or bad but I remained stuck to my point that I won't attend it until he leaves. Obviously, no one could ask him but my sister called me and apologized for her behavior. My parents made her do so. By then, my fiancé had also reached the venue. I had forgotten to inform him that I had stormed out. So, I made a U-turn and went back. When I reached there, my ex was standing at the entrance. He was trying to say something but I yelled at him, "Stay away from me," and went inside. My sister hugged me and said sorry but I was still angry at her. I told her if she tries any further tricks, I'm gonna cut her off from my life. She promised she wouldn't. The rest of the day was fun. My ex got badly smashed after seeing me with my boyfriend. I was deliberately acting touchy and cozy with my boyfriend which made his blood boil as per my sister's narration. He crashed into one of the rooms and didn't even attend the wedding dinner. Good for him. My parents and my brother were happy to meet my boyfriend and so was him. I feel sorry for the woman my ex is dating if at all he is. Update 2. Hello all. Some people don't understand boundaries and my sister is one of them. Despite telling her so many times not to interfere in my life, she again pulls another trick to have my ex back in my life, and this time I have cut her off once and for all. The most disgusting part is, even after so many insults and outbursts, my ex still joined hands with my sister in her tricks. 2 months back, my boyfriend proposed and I said yes. I posted my picture with the ring on my Instagram. My sister asked about it and I told her we were planning a wedding this year. She asked me the details saying she needs to prepare her speech and her dress, etc. I said we're not doing a fancy wedding, just a simple one at the city hall. She was not happy with a small wedding but that's a separate non-related discussion. I told my parents about the plan and they were happy and supportive about it. A week later, my fiancé got a text from an unknown account telling him that I had been cheating on him. Obviously he didn't run to inform me. He got alert. He asked the person about the details. Quite natural. The unknown person identified himself to be his well-wisher and shared pictures of me with my ex, which were obviously morphed because I never cheated on my fiancé. The person told him that my fiancé was my rebound, that I didn't love him and I traveled frequently to my hometown to meet my ex. My fiancé got suspicious because the person told him I was sleeping with my ex. My fiancé knew very well that I could never do that. He said he might have bought it if the person said any other name. He knew I was so resentful of my ex that I can never go back to him. My fiancé showed me the chats and I was raging with anger. I gave him my phone at that very moment to check. He didn't check saying he trusted me. I told him I was going to report this person. I drove him to the station and registered a case against an unknown person under cybercrime for morphing my pictures and sharing them online. My husband asked me if I was sure to report this because the person might very well turn out to be my sister. I said I didn't mind seeing her behind the bar. 10 days later, I got a call from the cops asking me to visit the station. I went there to find that the investigation was over and the IP address used to morph and send those pictures were of my sister's. I went full nuclear on her. The cops informed her about the case registered in her name and asked her to appear before the cops before they hunt her down. She called me and my fiancé but we didn't respond. My parents also called us but we declined their calls too. Finally, she arrived with her husband and started sobbing upon seeing me. She immediately confessed that she had done everything to secure my future. I said, explain to the cops how morphing my explicit pictures is going to secure my future. I lashed out at her. My parents arrived by then and tried to mediate. I said I was done with her and now she has to face the consequences of her actions. She was fined with a hefty amount and a stern warning to stay away from me. After coming out of the station, her husband tried to mess up with my fiancée. I told him to better watch his words and look out for his brother's behavior if they don't want him to be reported as a molester. I was on fire that night. I had tolerated her BS enough and that was it. The good news is, we got married last weekend. It was a small wedding with just our parents. My brother could not make it because it was short notice. It has been peaceful since my last outburst. I'm gonna remain firm in my decision to cut off my sister from my life because she is more harm than good. I treasure my relationship with my husband and cannot let anyone sabotage it. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Caught my wife cheating with my brother at our family reunion after I came home from military service. They got married, but she cheated again and they ended up in an open relationship. My girlfriend, 24 female, and I, 25 male, were dating for 7 months when she started taking selfies and full body portraits while we were out together. She didn't ask me to be in them, and when I asked her why she didn't take pictures with me, she said she didn't think I'd take an interest in her obsessive photography. That's what she called it, anyway. She didn't tell me she had certain apps, and I didn't see her on her phone more than the minimum, minus all the picture taking. Even though I brought it up, she still didn't ask me to be in a majority of her pictures. As a matter of fact, she started asking me to take her full body pose pictures. I refused to take her pictures, and decided to tell her I wanted her to stop doing it. Why would she be taking so many pictures, if not for validation and attention? I didn't believe for 1 second that no one saw these pictures, I just didn't know where she was posting them. We sat in a cafe, and first I told her about something funny I saw earlier that day, to ease my nerves. I was surprised that she laughed really hard and thought it was hysterical. A few seconds later, she got serious and told me she thought it was time for her to say how she really felt about me. Then she said she loved me. She dropped the L word. I was taken aback, but instead of telling her I loved her too, I told her I wanted to talk about why and how often she posted photos of herself online. She was suddenly very deflated, and said she hoped I wasn't going to ask her to stop, because that's what her exes always did. I asked her if she knew why she wanted to do it so much, and she said it was because it was like a journal of where she was and what she looked like throughout her life. She said it helped her to grow as a person, to reflect and think about where she was in life and where she was headed. I was about to tell her she could do the same thing with a paper journal, but then she surprised me. She said she would add me to her online accounts and give me her passcode. She said she would stop posting pictures of herself, unless it was just her face with me in it. I thought this compromise was more than fair, and actually proved to me that she cared what I had to say and how I felt about her vanity. So our relationship felt like one worth keeping, and I did check her phone occasionally, using the passcode she gave me. There was never anything bad on her phone. We got married shortly after. As soon as we moved in together, there were problems. She was extremely insistent about every little detail of our home. I eventually learned to stay out of certain things, but it got to the point where I didn't really want to talk to her about anything because I knew she might blow a fuse. One day she'd tell me she wanted me to be more involved in what she was up to, and the next day I'd try to give her my opinion or ask her questions about her activities, and she'd look at me like I just lost the game. I was growing more confused and frustrated by the day, until I decided to talk to her about things. Just like before, as soon as I was ready to say something, she told me she heard about my family reunion coming up and how she couldn't wait to go with me and see everyone. I didn't know how she heard about it before I did, but I thought her eagerness to see my family was a good sign. I thought that maybe she wasn't as annoyed with me as I thought she was. In the days leading up to the reunion, she was on her phone more, but she also seemed more receptive and attentive to my ideas and what I wanted to share with her. I felt relieved and like I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. She dressed nicely for the reunion and made her best dish for it. As soon as we walked in, she started scanning the crowd with a big smile. She went into the kitchen with her dish and was warmly greeted by my aunts and grandmother. I breathed a sigh of relief and felt like I still had a wife. I went to the bathroom, and by the time I came back out, she wasn't in the kitchen anymore. She was in the backyard, by the pool. I didn't even know my aunt had an in-ground pool put in, but there was my wife, already wearing her bathing suit, lounging with her legs in the water. My brother was sitting beside her, eating a burger and chatting. I sat beside my wife and greeted them. Suddenly their conversation died down and they seemed put off by my presence. My wife got in the pool, leaving us to stare at her. I looked at my brother and he was watching my wife shamelessly. I punched him in the shoulder, making him jump out of his skin. He apologized and walked off. Once the kids went to bed, the adults in the reunion started drinking. My wife encouraged me to drink more with her, since neither of us had to drive and we didn't have to work the next day. It got to the point where I fell out of my chair and started crawling away from a card game because I could no longer function. When I came to, it was still dark outside, and I was in a guest room bed. My wife's coat, purse, clothes, and shoes were in the room, but she wasn't. My head was throbbing and I was extremely thirsty. I got a drink in the kitchen and started peeking in bedrooms to look for her. She wasn't anywhere. I finally went out back and looked towards the tree lining. That's when I saw them. My brother, cornering my wife. I screamed at them and started rushing over. My brother panicked, put away his stuff, and started running while apologizing to me. As I passed my horrified wife, I called her what she was and continued chasing my brother until I tackled him in the yard and got a few hits in. He was begging me to stop, so I did, but I was still fuming. I just asked him why and how he could do this to me. He started bawling and said he was sorry he fell for her. I knew it wasn't just his fault. I looked at her and asked her the same thing, only more devastated. She said she felt like we were drifting apart, and as soon as she said that, I scoffed and yelled. That was the stupidest thing she could have said. I decided they deserved each other. I went inside the house and woke up all of my adult relatives, including my mom and dad, to tell them that my wife belonged to my brother now. She was to be addressed and known as his wife. They all started freaking out, at first wondering if it was a terrible hoax. I assured them it wasn't, and stood aside for them to scold the adulterers. My brother and wife stood on the back porch, completely ashamed and blocked off from getting more clothing. I took the car and left. Despite the family's disapproval, my brother and ex-wife actually did get married. I know it's no surprise to us that their traditional marriage didn't last. She cheated on him just a year into their marriage. What did surprise me though, is that he didn't divorce her. Instead, they started an open marriage and started sleeping with whoever they wanted. Eventually, they were both diagnosed with the same STD.